Welcome to episode 10 of Heresy from the Haven. This is a Wobbly Goblin Adventures podcast coming to you from the Smoky Gamers Haven in Spokane, Washington.
Crazy.
Yeah, right? We're your hosts. I'm Bob.
I'm Steven. I'm Jay. You beat me.
So in this series that we've been working on for you guys is an overall series that is supposed to be targeted for a new player to Horus Heresy. Maybe you're familiar with a bunch of Warhammer games already, or you know nothing about it at all. And we're kind of releasing this series as a whole. It covers anything from how you would build an army, things you would take into consideration building an army. We've covered Loyalist legions, Traitor legions, and now we are on to
Other legions.
Other factions.
Other. That's so derogatory.
Non-space marine.
Thank you.
Army
Legions.
options.
All right. Our hope is that a player can listen to this and decide if Horus Heresy is the game for them, and then maybe use some of our ridiculous, poorly worded knowledge to maybe pick a faction, covering some of the fluff or the lore.
Poorly stolen knowledge from Wikipedia?
Yeah. They just stole it too.
That's fair. I stole mine.
All right, so yeah, I think we're moving on to the next non-Space Marine Army legions
The sisters.
options.
Which is me! So I got Sisters of Silence when we were breaking up the different things to cover. They are from the Liber Imperium book. They are loyalist only. And so I think you mentioned in the previous episode the pariah gene. The Sisters of Silence, known as the Silent Sisterhood or the Witch Seekers, were a militant arm of the Telepathica that all have that pariah gene. They are all basically immune to the warp, invisible in the warp, and they hunt psychers that use the warp.
Right.
So that's interesting. They have an entire army that you can field. They are not as robust as some of the other armies out there. They are just humans that have this ability to interact with the warp users in a way that they aren't affected. So they are a very highly specialized force, especially during the Horus Heresy. They were used as basically hunting down rogue psychers or in fields where the legions were psychers. They were used in battles against like the Thousand Sons and things like that. They are basically and they're all female.
Kind of
says the Sisters of Silence. Yes, they helped enforce the Imperium's rigid laws in the places where the Imperium had taken over, and they were ruling. They're the secret police. Essentially, they travel around the universe in these feared black ships that kind of disappear into the stars, as well as kind of like their presence in the warp, if you will. They oversee the tithe of psychers later on, things like that. That's a little bit of a spoiler for future stuff. And they basically go on the hunt that never ends, which I thought was really cool. They're constantly hunting psychers, and then bringing them into Imperial buildings and things, testing them, seeing what their abilities are, and seeing where they can be used, which is kind of interesting. They were, as I mentioned, the elite force, so they weren't used all the time, and they were chosen to... The Emperor had a thing about psychers later on, when he kind of withdrew from the Council of Nicaea, where he disbanded all of the psychers, like the librarians from the Space Marine forces.
He realized the warp maybe is a bad thing.
The warp maybe is a bad
Now,
thing, and that's when he started turning the sisters.
He was a psyker.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So again, the Emperor, he's a good guy though.
And he created Magnus and built into his genes the ability to use psychics. So the Emperor knew what was going on. Once again, he's a bad guy.
So
It's
he
a
found
recurring
these
theme.
psychic
Keeps
nulls.
going.
Yeah, he found these psyker nulls that basically he's like, oh, you gotta go hunt down every renegade psyker that's out there. After he decided that they were all renegades, after he made a bunch of psychers.
Now, from my understanding, and because I'm trying to wrap my head around why they were created, is it's not like a wizard in our normal fantasy where you just kind of tap in and cast spells. Psychers, you're tapping into this chaotic warp energy, and sometimes you can't control it.
Right.
So you can kind of go insane and go crazy, and they're super dangerous. It's kind of where this is coming from.
And during the Crusades, some of the planets that they came to try to bring into Imperial control were ripe with psychers. Like there were psychers everywhere.
It was part of the
Sisters
culture.
Silence, right?
Yeah.
Like the Sisters of Silence were developed to help combat them, if you
Right.
will.
They were called, basically, they were referred to as untouchables. So not only did they present no psychic energy in the warp as these null creatures, but they had no soul shadow in the warp either.
Right.
So they were even rare among
Yeah.
nulls.
Right.
Which is fascinating. So they have some special units. They're mostly infantry, or have some it's a little bit of artillery. Their points are very cheap. They're very squishy in game terms.
Very much the rapier, the glass hammer.
The glass hammer. But what they do very well. So if you ally them in, or if you want to play them, they are very good against basically psyker units and things like that. So their army ability. What's that?
Sorry, also loyalist only for this.
Loyalist.
Loyalist only. Yes,
Okay,
I think I said
okay.
that. But
Sorry, I was double checking.
yes, their army ability is these. Basically, they're broken down into 3 chambers. It's called the Chamber Militant, and the Chamber Vigilance is unlimited. So there's these 3 different abilities. The Chamber Vigilance you can give one of your units. You can give the unit Scout or Infiltrate. So you can take unlimited those in building a list. If you want to take the other units from the other 2 chambers, you have to take an HQ choice of that chamber, and then you can choose up to 3 units from that chamber to add to your army.
So once again, almost like replacing the right of war that the
Replacing
legions
the right
have.
of war.
This is how you add different elements.
And the Chamber of Oblivion gives Fearless against demons and corrupted units
Makes
when
sense.
you're locked in combat with them. And the Chamber of Judgment gives Fearless against Psychers when you're locked in combat with them. So, not too many special rules. That's their main thing. Is they're really sneaky. They infiltrate. They scout around. They're where you least expect them when you least want them there, and they're really good at handling perils of the warp, essentially. So, I'm sure there's somebody out there that's going to say, "Man, he did not do that justice." I probably didn't, but that's basically a synopsis.
Pick on us in
of,
the comments.
pick on us. That's great. So basically, it's a sisterhood that hunts psychic users.
And they're a full army. You can run a
Full army.
That's actually
Yeah.
a really interesting point as an avid 40K player myself. In 40K, there is a unit of Sisters of Silence you can take.
There is, yes.
But it's just that unit.
Yeah.
And in Horus Heresy, they have multiple HQ choices, multiple troop choices, elite choices. Like they developed a full army list.
Their own
based
vehicles.
around, right? Yeah, their own vehicles. You bet. I thought that was pretty neat. And then if a person dives deep into the Sisters of Silence lore, you'll find that it's a pretty tragic story what ends up happening to them by the Emperor, what he does to them after the Horus Heresy.
Again, we weren't going into deep dives. Didn't go there, but yes.
What? As a loyalist player, why do I feel so bad every episode?
You mean as the bad guy
As you
player?
should.
This is really weird for me right now.
So I think that brings us to
The one and only army that you can ally in that is traitor only, the Runestorm Demons. Right now, the list is very small. Well, before I get into that, so we've talked about the warp, and the warp being kind of a dimension next to our galaxy, that all of our emotions in the galaxy, like all the rage of all the different living beings, have manifested into the chaos god Khorne, and you can go through all of them. There's major gods, minor gods. So the warp is where all these demons live. So going through the warp, when warp travel was developed, when ships would try to travel, almost kind of like wormhole concept, where you can go from this point to this point much faster by traveling through the warp. When mortals started doing it, they were getting torn apart by demons, and they figured out they had to put these Geller fields around their ships to protect them. So that's where the demons live, and as the heresy started going on further, a lot of the traitor legions realized that they could actually tap into the warp, rip open a quick hole in the warp, and bring demons out as their allies to fight. So currently, there's a very small army list. It's the Runestorm Demons PDF that you can find on the Warhammer community website. And that's where you can find all any of the other PDF units
For free.
we're talking about. Yeah, they're free. It's free download. And it currently has, this is how small this list is, it has a special character HQ, a generic HQ, a generic troop choice, and then my boy Cabanda as the Cabandangron as a Lord of War choice. So the one HQ choice that's named, Samus and Cabanda, are repeat in a lot of the different stories. But other than those two special characters, it's literally just the HQ and the troop choice.
Samus?
Yeah, Samus.
Okay.
Yeah, you get it now, right?
Samus.
Yes. Yeah, right. So they are, the belief is that there's going to be a much more expanded PDF coming out for them, or maybe it ends up in a book, maybe one of their campaign books that'll have what they call unbound demons, and then a person can really run a full demon list. Right now these are considered bound demons, and what that means is you can't just start an army of demons on the table. You have to have something on the table that has the ability to summon them. And that is either, we talked in the previous episodes about one of the Space Marine HQ choices being a Centurion, can take different consuls that can turn them into a librarian, into a chaplain, into the Master of Signals, but they could also be turned into an esoterist.
Yep.
And what's interesting is the esoterist has strong abilities against demons, so if you're playing a loyalist player and you had an esoterist, and if your opponent has demons, you can do great things against the demons. But that esoterist also has the ability to rip a little hole in reality, and the demons come out of that hole, which is
and those are psychers, right?
The demons?
No, the esoterists.
They are psychers. Yep. Yep.
Sisters of Psychers.
They had this interesting thing, so this may tap into some of the 40K players if you're familiar with this, and even in, well, I guess not in loyalist or traitor legions now, but you have different marks of chaos. Well, the chaos symbol is an 8-pointed star, and the Runestorm demon list has what they call the etheric dominions, and it actually has one for each of the points. So there's 4 that are specific to the 4 chaos gods, but the ones that are not, and their abilities that if you're going to take units from this small army list, you have to assign in your army list what etheric dominion is on that unit, and it gives that unit abilities, it gives it bonuses. So it might be something that gives them more of a bonus in movement or more of a bonus in close combat, but that unit then gets that ability for the remainder for the game when you build.
Can you summon different ones that have different abilities?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, but again, there's not many options. The options are pretty cool. The generic HQ choice and the generic unit, the troop choice, they're tough as nails. They're like 3 wounds each, toughness 5. They're beasts. They're saved. They don't, generally speaking, have a normal armor save. Instead, they just have kind of a warp etheric save, and that save is usually negated by
Psychers.
Sisters of Silence.
Sisters of Silence.
and force weapons that librarians carry. There's different things that can make demons die a lot faster. The other interesting thing about them being bound demons is being that there's a summoner that brings them in, that they're bound to that summoner. If that summoner dies during the game, all of the demon's abilities drop.
But it doesn't make the demon go away.
Doesn't make them go away, it just makes them weaker on the tabletop. And that's where when they finally come out with that unbound demon list, I'm assuming then it's going to be all these demons that are running across, and they're not tethered to the one who bound them, if you will.
All demons all the time.
Yeah, right.
That's cool narratively. I
think
like that.
I think that would be pretty fun, right? Yeah, it just kind of sucks with, my Esoterus dies and Commando drops. Caliban Angron drops. It makes me a little sad.
Shed a tear for chaos.
For the one, I just love the fact that it's the one trader-only force that's not Marine, and it has 2 special characters and an HQ and a troop choice, and that's it. There's nothing to it.
As it should be.
But there are tanks in close combat. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
But that's about it for Ruined Storm Demons. We expect to see a lot more from them when it could be like the Siege of Chthoniya book. It could be a campaign book that comes out with rules in them for them for something, because it really
It's got to be coming.
They really only the big demon forces really only started kicking in towards the end of Heresy at the Siege of Terra when the Loyalist legions all converge on. It's kind of the big final battle, and that's when demons were just running everywhere. So we're assuming it's probably a pretty safe assumption they're not going to get a book of their own, but they'll come out with a Siege of Terra campaign book, and the rules for the Unbound Demon list will be in that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. That's all I got about demons.
I wanted to throw out there, if you're brand new to the hobby, modeling wise, this is where it's at.
Yeah.
Now there are Ruined Storm demon models that are sold.
Yeah. You can use 40K models.
You can have so much fun with the gribblies and the claws, the appendages, and just
Flying spaghetti monsters.
go wild with it. Yeah.
And that's a take.
Super cool.
How about you just use pipe cleaners and tie them all together and put googly eyes on them?
I have that.
You do that.
I've got a few of them already.
I'd be afraid of it. Awesome. So that will bring us to the last section of the Liber Mechanicum book,
The big boys.
the Titan Legions.
Yeah.
See, there's the word, legions.
Official name.
You are correct. I was wrong. You are better. I am worse. What else?
This is all competition, right? Yeah. Last episode, we touched on the Questoris Knight households,
Right.
Kind of those giant mechs, bipedal walking around, they have a pilot. How about we take that and we quadruple them in size?
Right.
Instead of 30 to 40 feet tall, now we're talking hundreds of feet tall. Instead of one pilot, you have tens of hundreds or even maybe thousands of workers piloting these giant titans of industry. You have what are called princeps, or the pilots that really they actually tie in.
Yeah, they're linked.
They're linked in directly again. They have to kind of placate that machine spirit that keeps coming up in the Mechanicum book. You have, in fact, Mechanicum Archmagos, and they're actually on the Titan themselves, running the engines. Scotty keeping the engine going.
Yeah, Scotty from Star Trek. She can't take any more, Captain.
She can't do it. You have a bunch of mindless servitors constantly loading ammo. It's a walking tank spaceship. They're massive, massive models.
Yes, the largest ones can annihilate cities with their firepower. I mean, they're just
With the weapons,
With one shot.
even on the table. I mean, you're paying the points for it. We'll get to the points. We'll talk about it briefly. You're paying the points so you can wipe out squads per turn in shooting. They're very much meant to be that way narratively. You kind of play them going into that game knowing it's going to be like that. You're there for the spectacle, the actual just playing them and that narrative that you can build with your opponent. In the actual Heresy themselves, they are based around Forge Worlds. We mentioned before where the Knights have their own households. These actually have their own Forge Worlds they're kind of tied to. They have their own designs and their own technologies. And again, Forge Worlds can kind of be, they can be loyalist, and of course Horus himself,
right.
with his snake tongue, convinced some to have some traitor Titan legions. So again, you can play in traitor loyalist. What's really cool about them, the next part, is they actually have a whole support infantry called the Secutari. These are these cybernetically augmented warriors that sweep behind the Titans to kind of mop up everything they miss. Because when you're 200 feet tall and you blow up a skyscraper, you don't pick through the rubble, right? So that these little swarming infantry kind of closely follow behind and just
Like the dude at the back of the parade.
Yeah.
Behind the elephant.
Except they have weapons and they're stabbing.
Right, okay.
So they are the pinnacle of the Lords of War. I mean, I think the biggest one is the Warlord Titan.
Yeah, the machine gods.
The biggest one that can be fielded in the game?
In
or
the actual
biggest-
rule set.
Yes.
Yeah, to be fair. It's what, 3,000 points?
Yeah, it's 3,000 points, and you're talking about a model that stands about this much.
Yeah.
About this tall. And points-wise, but dollar-wise, I think they're probably close to
3,000 is
equivalent, yeah.
probably the same.
Why don't we have props again? I've got a Reaver, a Warlord,
You have
and a
them all over
Warhound
the
sitting
place.
here, right? Yeah. Oh well.
We're good at this game.
We'll make that
In the deep
editors,
dive, yeah, we'll get there. Yeah.
do the layover pictures.
Yeah. So
Smart.
you actually can, rules-wise, take them by themselves. You're going to end up with one Titan and a bunch of Secretary running around. Or again, you throw them into your Space Marine army. You want to have a Reaver Titan running along your lines? Throw it in there, Lord of War, have some fun. On the tabletop, it's pretty straightforward. You point, you shoot, you walk forward and crush stuff. There's no rights of war. There's no tactics. You shoot stuff.
And like, you might, if you're experienced, you might think, oh my gosh, those games are going to be so huge. Well, a Warhound Titan is the smallest Titan.
Mm-hmm.
It's 1,500 points. No, it's
No,
750.
750.
750.
So 750 points. A 10-man Terminator in a Spartan is 1,000 points.
Right.
So when you're like, oh my god, how we got to play a huge game, you don't have to play a huge game.
Right, yeah. With that 25% threshold, with the average being 3,000 points, it's 25% being 750 points, you can put a Warhound Titan in. And I've played against a couple of them. They're manageable. If that 10-man Terminator squad got into base contact in close combat with that Warhound,
Yep.
they're going to take it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are manageable. In other iterations of 40K games, and the Titans were like, you don't put them on the table, they're too powerful. That you can deal with them in this game.
Yeah, yeah. And again, you can play them by themselves, but just like the Knights, maybe some point, get deep in the hobby, pick one up. You can play it in so many different armies. You can kind of paint up its own colors.
Mm-hmm.
You play with that Lord of War. You don't have to tie it to a certain legion or a certain army. So it's always.
I have a
fun.
question.
Yes, sir.
Do the legions and the Knight Questores tie in together?
Only in
Space Marine legions?
No,
the-
the Titan Legion. Like, can you take a Warhound and then Knights?
Well, you can as allies and things.
Okay.
Yeah, you could bring
Yeah.
it in, or you could even do a Knight household and then use the Lord of War slot for
For sure.
a Titan.
Okay.
Yeah, you can always drop into that slot.
And in the fluff, they are different. Like
Okay.
you have the Knight households, and then you have the like I'm doing Legion Voltura for my Titan Legion,
Yep.
and it's a separate legion, if you will. They have their own colors.
Yeah, again, it's a spectacle. Awesome models,
Mhm.
expensive models to be fair, but it's awesome stuff.
Yeah, they're very, very cool. Anything else about Titans?
That's all I got.
All right. Well, puts us on deck for
Oh, the Solar Auxilia.
The best humans?
The best humans. That's a nice way of putting it.
the first line humans, right?
First line, yeah. It's so the Solar Auxilia. It's an elite. They're the elite of the army, essentially.
Of the Imperial Army.
Of the
humans,
Imperial
right?
Army of humans, they are the elite force.
Yeah.
They originated in the solar sector, which is basically Terra, and they were originally recruited from Terra, Mars, and Saturn.
Mhm.
What is there to say about them? They're basically the Imperial Guard
From
of
40K.
From 40K
Or
of
Astro Military.
30K.
Sorry.
Astro Military. Excuse me.
Show my age there.
You're right.
They're disciplined. They're well equipped. They're widely considered to be widely considered by many
Got it.
to be second only to the Legion Astartes.
Mhm.
They have some really awesome artillery. They have big, great formations and things like that you can use in game. By the 2nd century, the Great Crusade, the Solar Auxilia made up between 20 and 25% of the Imperial Army. As they kept expanding and expanding and expanding across the universe, there wasn't enough Space Marines to do
No.
everything that they needed to do. So normally, Space Marine legions had their own Solar Auxilia armies that went along with them in the fleets in order to bring about compliance, ensure compliance. The Space Marines go in, make a civilization compliant, and then they go off and they put the military there until they're guaranteed that they're compliant, and then they start recruiting from that population to create another.
Easy now. You're getting into my next one.
Yeah.
Third line.
So, they served alongside rogue traders and expeditionary fleets. They guarded worlds from outside threats as well as rebellions. They're basically just the military, the basic military that everybody needs to have.
Imagine being a human with a gun in this world, in this galaxy, when you're fighting against space marines and aliens and demons.
It sounds terrifying.
Right.
It sounds terrifying. On a tactical level, the building block of the solar cohort was called a Tercio? Tercio.
I believe Tercio. Correct me if I'm
Okay,
wrong.
that makes sense. Itself is made up of 3 sections whose nature was defined by weaponry and battlefield role. They kind of are they're so well trained that they act as one on the battlefield. So they're humans that are very so well trained that their coordination and everything is almost like these 3 units are working with one singular mind, which is something that's cool about it. They normally consisted of 20 armored las rifle troops, veteran troops, and then more advanced short range weaponry. So you have 3, and then all of those work as kind of a unit type thing. That's humans. I mean, that's the Solar Auxilia.
A lot of boots on the ground.
Yeah, and if you're a treadhead too, if you like tanks, this is the tank army.
That's
they
where I'm
specialize in
headed.
a lot of heavy weapons, right?
So their army ability, the Tercio, gives a special rule where they act as one, so their reactions and things. I'm going to shoot at that one unit of tanks, which is 3 tanks. Well, actually, there's 9 tanks, and they all get to react back. Kind of a thing. So the Tercios is a special rule that encompass all of the Solar Auxilia. And then you have 8 combat cohort doctrines, is what they're called. Cohort doctrines, not combat doctrines. And basically they're kind of like the rights of war we discussed, except they apply to specific types of infantry units or specific types of artillery units. So there's 8 different ones. I don't want to go into all of them in depth, but essentially it's the veterans are better, the las rifle guys are better, the infantry guys are better, there's the veterans are better. There's also like a berserker one where they ran out of people to apply to the military, so they started taking them from the penal colony. They start taking them from the jails and like criminals and things and like go. There's also a nomad one. Essentially, it's like berserkers, wild people.
Maybe the planets they were
pulling from were not as civilized, so they have different things like that. And then, I mean, there's a Solar Auxilia army where you can field 27 Lehman Russ tanks.
Is that in Solar Auxilia? Because that's in militia.
That's Imperial Militia, I believe.
Oh, okay. I'm wrong. I'm stealing his thunder.
You're still stealing my thunder.
Don't worry about it. Anyway, there's lots of really cool stuff you can do with them. Be aware, where I was talking about custodes and they're only needing like 30 models, you need about 100 Imperial.
If you built
infantry,
infantry,
if you built the infantry one, you're looking at a lot of models. Because whereas Space Marines are 20 to 30 points a model.
Yeah, 10 points for basic, right?
10 points for basic. And you get custodes that are 30 to 40 points a model. You've got like 2 points. 2 points. So yeah.
It's a really strategic army. You kind of mentioned the units kind of play together. It's all about positioning. It's really in depth. A lot of modeling, a lot of painting. You could certainly dive right into them. Really cool army. You just kind of be aware of that.
If you like tanks, if you are treadhead, that's the army for you because you can field all kinds of different heavy weaponry that is really cool looking.
And it's really kind of the quintessential allied force to Space Marine Legions.
Yes.
If you want to bring an allied force in and run it, because there were so many stories where the Space Marines were fighting side by side with the Solar Auxilia, that you could easily run a Space Marine army and then have a little detachment of a couple of of Imperial Guard, for lack of better words, tanks and infantry and whatnot that are
Absolutely.
Make a little story out of your list, for sure.
absolutely.
So that's the Solar Auxilia. Anything?
That was the first line. So now we turn to the third line.
First line and second line, yeah. Where so the last one, and honestly, I can say this is, in my opinion, the coolest army list available in Horus Heresy. Period. Also, probably one of the most complicated army lists, and one of the most. Oh, it's so fun, and I mean, you could build this list to stomp people's face if you wanted to. Otherwise, this is probably a list that's not going to do real well. This is the militia. So if the Solar Auxilia are the highly trained, they have the best equipment for humans, they have the best discipline. This is not the militia.
No.
The militia is essentially, so I stole another little blurb, known as the Exertus Imperialis or the Imperialis Auxilia. These armies were founded to be standing defense force of a planet that had been brought into compliance with the Imperium during the Great Crusade. Essentially, it's a colonial defense force. Mm-hmm. Its role is to enforce the imperial truth if needed, defend the administrators of the compliance should any resistance pop up, and then defend against any raiding aliens or pirates. The first and second lines of the Imperial Army would have already moved on to the next planet, and this third line force would be made up of the planet's locals. So they're going through and they're pulling out of the locals, and this is where you'd get some volunteers, but they would absolutely empty the jails, the penal legions, and bring them in. And then they would also use abhumans, and abhumans are something we haven't really talked about. It's the dark secret of the Imperium is abhumans would be basically halflings, ratlings is what they called them. They would be ogrins, like big ogres. So whether they was from genetic mutation because of a planet had radiation or something on it, or maybe high gravity, there's these abhumans that are, the rest of the Imperium just treats them like dirt. They're the worst of the worst in their eyes, but they're just other beings that mutated from humans essentially. So this army can be traitor or loyalist. And the third line that we keep talking about is actually a significant rule in this game.
Very, yeah.
Because what they are equipped with, so now you have a planet that the Imperium came into, whooped the tar out of it, got brought it into compliance, all the armies leave, and the people that are left behind are using what they left behind. So their tanks, they have a lot of the same tanks, a lot of the same equipment, but they don't work as well. They're breaking down on them.
Oh yeah. They explode easier.
They explode easier in gameplay. Their tanks don't last nearly as long. They're cheaper points-wise. And then instead of the Rite of Wars that we were talking about for the Space Marine Legions, and then the different ways that some of the other forces have it, what they have is what they call a provenance system. So when you take a force commander, a leader of this army, you have to pick up to 2 provenances. You don't have to take them, but you should take them. And it's important to know that these provenances don't work together at all. Some of them don't work together, but to give you an idea of, this army is so flexible. You could, for any old Warhammer players out there, you could literally take a Warhammer Fantasy Bretonnian army from 15, 20 years ago and say, this is my militia army.
Sure. And you could play Horus
and you could play the on knights with the lances and the bow. Yep. You could do anything you wanted. But I'm just going to go over a handful of these provinces. I'm just going to name some of them just so you get kind of the idea of what these things are. So you take 2 of these, and each one of these will affect either what units you can take or take more of, for example, or units that it boosts the abilities of certain units. But just the names. You have Warrior Elite, okay. Gene Crafted, you have to roll a d6 to see what happens. Yeah. Clan Folk Levy, Legacies of the Great Crusade, Cyber Augmentations, Alchem Jackers, these guys are literally drug addicts, right? Survivors of the Dark Age. You can have Armory of the Old Knight, you can have Kinfolk Helots, Abhuman Muster, you can take a whole army of Ogrins.
Yep.
Feral Warriors, so these are all these different, you can take 2 of these at the beginning of when you're building your army, mustering your force, and it gives you a whole new way to build your army. Debased Rabble, Tainted Flesh, Industrial Stronghold, Unending Horde. Ogren Conscripts, that's where you bring in the armies of Ogrins. So yeah, it's the flexibility of what you could do with this army is unbelievable. And as Stephen had mistakenly said that you could with the, for example, in a heavy support choice, one basic tank of the Solar Auxilia is a Lehman Russ battle tank. Well, in the heavy support choice of the militia, you could take one Lehman Russ battle tank, right? As your heavy choice, you could take one. But you take one of these doctrines, if you will, and you can take up to. So normally you have 3 heavy support choices. You could take 2 more heavy support choices. They have to be the Lehman Russ choice. And you could do these as the Lehman Russ choices, and you could take up to 5 more Lehman Russes per these. So you could take 30 Lehman Russes. You could take one, unless you take this, I forget the name of them already, unless you take this Providence that allows you to take up to 30 Lehman Russes.
30 old rusted.
Broken down.
To be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a junkyard of Lehman Russes, but you can still take them. And there's still armor 14 on the front. There's still, I mean, the unending horde one is every infantry unit that's moving across the table. If it gets wiped out, on a 4+, you can, on a 50-50 chance, you can put it on the edge of the table and walk it back on. It's just an unending horde. Like, so these different provinces just give you some really, really cool flexibility. And again, if you're a converter, you could dive into this army. You could make so many different things. Whole army of Ogren, a whole army of abhumans, whole army of drug addicts, whole army of penal legion. You could have guys. The whole army has jump packs and are jumping across the table.
My first thought was I was going to come up with my own planet and its own culture.
Yeah,
and kind of build provinces, army list of what did I envision this planet becoming?
If there were a bunch of savages on that planet, you could take the feral one and make them, and they get all bonuses in movement and close combat because they're all feral crazy warriors.
I'm so sad I got rid of my fantasy dwarves years ago.
But you could absolutely do the abhuman one with that. They are, and then one of the detriments of this army is they are literally just, people on this planet that are picking up arms and are trying to defend this planet.
Like you said, imagine being a guy with a rifle in this world.
Right. So versus the guy who has elite training, now this is, a shoemaker from down the road who's trying to protect against whatever invasion is happening. So their ability in the game, there's abilities where you can break and run away. These guys run away.
Yeah.
Like their leadership is terrible. Their skill sets aren't great. But it's so cool. It is such a cool army. Like you could do so much with this. It's crazy that they released this as a PDF unit or army list as well.
Free.
It's free off the Warhammer community website, and it is by far the most customizable, flexible army list. You can do anything with this. So even as an allied detachment, this thing would be amazing. The warlord trait. So when you take your warlord, your leader of your army, some of the names of these are Ruthless Tyrant, Beloved by the People, Connoisseur of Alien Curiosities, Robber Baron. So this is an ability that your warlord has that then gives him abilities on the table, like the Beloved of the People one. So now this was some hero who stepped up to be the leader of this army. And in the rules, if he dies, your whole army gets massive boosts like Feel No Pain 4+, and they get their weapon skill for fighting in close combat gets stronger. They get stronger for 1 turn. So they're all angry because you just killed their hero. It's just such a cool army.
And just as a matter of clarification, since we were doing all of these as kind of like a non-deep dive, this is the first time we've mentioned a warlord trait.
Right.
We'll go more into those. There additional ways to customize and modify.
It's a single ability that your gets, right?
Your army buildings.
Yeah, it's just the names though: Ruthless Tyrant, Robber
that's
Baron,
awesome.
right? It's fun, but so that pretty much wraps up the militia.
Kind of the perfect army to end on. If you have miniatures and you want to play Horus Heresy, you want a free rule set.
You could probably make an army out of just about any models you have. You could fit them into this army list. It's really fun. It's a really cool list.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
But
Is that all the armies?
did we do it?
I think we're there.
We've covered all the legions, loyalist and traitor, all the extras outside of and from the Imperium book, the Mechanicum book, or from the free PDFs online.
18 plus 9 is 27.
Is the podcast, are we done?
We're not.
Is there more coming?
There might be more coming.
I hope so.
Right? So our final episode will be after this one. What was this, 10? So we'll be on episode 11. We thought it was going to be 7.
For the series.
Right, for this series, right, for this series. Yeah. We're going to kind of go over again with some of the army list building, getting into maybe how you bring allies, how you bring Lords of War. Probably about it. We don't want to get into deep diving, but when this is done, that's when we get to cut loose. We get to talk about the things we want to talk about.
Yeah.
So then we'll be, where this is going to be released in 3 blocks of 4, then it'll be, one a month, one every couple of weeks, we'll be dropping a new
It's some
episode.
cool stuff to talk about for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, we're just chomping. We got
Can't wait.
a
I got
list.
lots of things.
We got a list.
Yep.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for this episode. If you like our content and you want to see more, make sure to like, comment, follow, or subscribe. If you want to support us and help our ability to create even better content, and it could get better.
It probably.
We could have had props for God's sake. We could have warlord type.
We have them
here.
behind you.
Right. Get up and walk over and grab one. But make sure there's a link to our Patreon down below. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate you joining us on this journey.
We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.